Welcome to American Education FM, everybody. I'm Dr. Sean Brooks. Welcome back, everybody. This may be a bit of a shorter episode. My apologies on that. I have a few things here that I want to mention right off of the top and throughout. And one particular thing is kind of not necessarily related to a number of things that I've brought up, although it kind of is, I guess, if you think about it, certainly from a judicial and legal standpoint. And I'll get to that in a minute. But first of all, I don't know if you've noticed, but on basically every single YouTube video, if you open up YouTube and begin to watch something, there's a Kamala Harris commercial right out of the gate on almost every single video. It is overwhelming and disturbing. But it's pretty evident, again, that YouTube has certainly sided with her, and why would that not be the case? I mean, they're in league with one another on a constant basis, and that really shouldn't surprise anybody. But man, it is almost every single video, regardless of the kind of video that you're attempting to watch. So, of course, I skip through them as quickly as possible, but yeah, those are only going to intensify, I'm sure. With all of that said, I've seen some other videos here relating to the Donald Trump alleged shooting, quote unquote, and what actually took place. I find it beyond bizarre. More information coming out, more evidence coming out. You now also have this video, badge cam video, of a police officer on the ground in front of the windows of the building where the patsy was on top of the roof with the gun. Not to mention there's footage again of the gun being multiple feet away from the actual shooter at the time. Now again, was the gun moved for any particular reason? It seems again like you would keep everything right where it was and not want to tamper with evidence. And yet that seems to be the case as to what was happening on the roof. But either way, in this particular video, you end up seeing what appears to be muzzle flashes coming out of the window on the bottom floor of that particular building, again, where the sloped roof was. Beyond strange. And then what appears to also be a drone flying around, both over in that particular area where the building was, but also on the stage after Donald Trump was on the ground and there were people around him. There appears to be a drone that's flying across the lectern, so to speak, and certainly on that stage in some of these videos that are coming out. Again, could they be tampered with? It's possible. It's possible it's all just a distraction. But again, as I've said in the Substack and said here on the show, and I'm sure you're well aware, there are more things going on with that than we can possibly imagine. The inconsistencies from the FBI continue. That's not necessarily a new thing either, but that, of course, is something that continues. You had Christopher Wray openly state that he wasn't sure that Donald Trump was shot in the ear. He said it's possible it was shrapnel. And then, of course, everybody came out later and said that that was incorrect, including people at the FBI, that it was evident that he had been shot in the ear. So, I mean, why would you have conflicting stories like that? Why would you have the director of the FBI say that he didn't know or have any evidence that he was shot in the ear, but at the exact same time, he doesn't have evidence of other things either, or he has hard evidence of other things that were right there at the scene that were 100% visible and he should have known about, but even doesn't have all of that evidence? It's confusing, and there's just way too many inconsistencies. So again, too many theories out there. I'm willing to accept just about all of them. And I think, overarching umbrella point is that we're not going to hear about what really went on that day and who was involved and all of the players that were involved. I don't think we're ever going to be told. But if you're gullible enough to believe the mainstream media's take on what actually took place, God help you, because you're not going to be able to think outside of the box regarding anything, or even that there is a box. You're not even going to be able to understand that point. And that people who think inside of that box is created on purpose for them to keep their mind frame just within a very specific area and not think beyond it. So, yeah, a lot going on. And I've put some new videos on my Gab page also, again, from some of this badge cam footage that's certainly interesting. Not to mention, again, in the badge cam footage of the people who are actually on the roof, they're blurring out the body. Why would you do that? Why would you blur out a dead body? We can see the blood, we can see the guy's legs, Why wouldn't you actually show us their face? Is it because it's going to contradict the story that you're telling everybody? Probably. So, too many moving parts in this one. I'm not sure where to land on it. Just too many moving parts. Okay. With that said, there's a lot of chatter on a lot of these internet boards about an imminent attack of some kind taking place. Again, I'm not saying this to panic anybody. I'm simply saying that based on a number of different scenarios, of course, that we've been over on the show and a number of different options that could possibly take place, they've allegedly taken a shot at Donald Trump. So that scenario, for whatever you want to think about it, that scenario has now been played out. It's not that they wouldn't do it again, and it's not even that they wouldn't do it to Joe Biden, even as a scripted event, where Joe Biden wouldn't really be taken out, but something else may happen. In any case, same thing with Kamala Harris, frankly. In any case, an actual attack is something that is certainly still on the table, because that's a scenario that hasn't been played out yet, certainly not in recent time. So I don't know how we prepare for such a thing other than remain vigilant and, have things at your disposal that you'll need in case power goes out or anything along those lines. But again, if people aren't considering these different options and the different scenarios that haven't been exhausted to their fullest extent, it just means that you're ripe for the picking regarding any particular scenario that may take place in the future. So I think that one is likely to occur. What will it be? I'm not sure. Power outage, cyber attack, internet outage, massive outage of some kind. That, of course, would take down a great deal of things. It would hamper banking. It would take that off the table. The ability to purchase anything, by and large, would be taken off the table, certainly using debit cards, credit cards, things of that nature. You could still use cash. However, if registers aren't working, good luck there. And if particular stores ran out of cash, good luck there. So yeah, have storable food, have storable water, have these things on hand in case such a thing were to actually take place. Because if you've paid attention to the Q drops, there's always been the prevailing theory of the 10 days of darkness and all the different meanings that may entail. Again, 10 days without power, 10 days without the ability to access cash or purchase anything. So having at least 10 days of something on hand would certainly be, I think, worthwhile. And at the exact same time, it's a scenario that hasn't played out yet. It's, again, a scenario that the American public hasn't seen yet nor considered. Certainly a great deal of them haven't. So, again, that's something to keep in mind and something to prepare for just in case. Let me see here. I want to mention this now and spend a little time on this. I found this interesting, and this is sort of the legal story that I wanted to bring up that I think is fascinating, and I'll link it in the description below if you're interested in hearing this firsthand from the individual who very specifically experienced this a number of months ago, if memory serves. You've heard me bring this person up before, and I criticized them a number of years ago, specifically regarding their response on YouTube to the fake Uvalde shooting. This individual is named Mike Glover. Mike Glover is a retired Special Forces military individual, lots of gun training and preparedness and self-defense and home security and a number of different things that he does and works with companies, groups, education, the whole thing. And I criticized him back when it came to Uvalde because, again, he got on YouTube and he made a highly charged emotional video. How on earth could all those kids get killed like that? And how on earth could those cops act that way? And how on earth could this happen and that happen? And he was unable to consider that the entire thing was fake, which is unfortunate for him. And even in this particular scenario that happened to him a number of months ago, I'm going to describe his sort of overall take on the whole thing, where he's rather naive about the justice system. And he apparently believed before his incident that I'll describe here that the justice system worked for the people and on behalf of the people, including law enforcement. And he has since learned this the hard way, that is not the case. So, a number of months ago, Mike Glover was arrested for alleged domestic violence between he and his wife. As it turns out, listening to him describe this now, none of that actually happened. There was no domestic violence. There was nothing of the sort. And he lays this out in detail, which there's no reason to not believe him. Unfortunately, too, a lot of people jumped on YouTube after this happened and started to criticize him for beating his wife, which didn't happen. And again, these people have massive channels and they gossip among one another as gun-toting individuals. You know, my gun's bigger than your gun and I can shoot them better than you can and blah, 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 blah. I mean, it's all this pissing contest on who can handle a gun better than somebody else. And none of it is necessarily helpful. And they would do well, again, to not jump to conclusions on particular issues that they know nothing about. And a lot of people apparently did regarding Mike Glover. I didn't know anything about the story. It wasn't my business and I didn't care. I'm coming in after the fact and describing his story here briefly. And again, I'll link it in the description below if you're interested in hearing him talk about it. Because this has to do with a complete distrust of the judicial system, lawyers, law enforcement, and CPS. And he has 3 kids with his wife. He has 2 young twins who are, I believe, below the age of 5. So I want to say they're 4 years old maybe. And then he has a 10-month-old now, who I believe was 7 months or 6 months old at the time that all of this happened. So in this particular scenario, he describes the evening that all of this went down between he and his wife. He says that he and his wife were preparing to basically take a trip to Montana from Utah, if I'm getting this correct. Again, the details are in his actual telling of it, which he lays out himself with a friend of his who also has a show. And anyway, it's disturbing because all it really takes is one person lying and then all hell breaks loose. And then everybody's guilty until proven innocent. So I'm running off of memory here, but let me see if I can get this generally straight. It's the evening before they're about to go to Montana on some business-related trip, again, regarding self-defense, shooting guns, whatever it may be. And his wife is tired, and he's tired, and he describes their general routine of getting up in the morning and whatever, and all of this happens in the morning hours. He also lays out that in most domestic violence, quote-unquote, cases, most of it has to do with the evening hours, alcohol and or drug abuse, and previous domestic violence that has existed within the house, or a history of criminal activity among one or both of the parties in a domestic violence case. And he openly looks at the camera and he says, none of that was the case in this case. None of us were intoxicated. It was early morning. We had just woken up. I was making breakfast for my kids, and then the following occurred. He said his wife started to yell about something and was upset about something, and was holding their child at the time. Again, early in the morning after everybody woke up. I'm skipping around a little bit, but this is the general gist of all of it. And she hands their youngest child, 7 months old or so, to him and gets him dressed and whatever else. And then hands the child back and then goes downstairs to fix breakfast for their twins, their 4-year-old twins, if that's their age. He's fixing them breakfast, and then briefly, again, after kind of a small little spat between the two of them that just had to do with them being tired and them about to have a long trip to Montana, that Mike is downstairs in his kitchen, and he witnesses his wife buck naked walk downstairs and stand at the threshold of the bottom of their stairs on the first floor, between the first floor and the second floor of their house. He says she's holding their youngest child as she's buck naked, no clothes on. He says now she's breastfeeding this child, but there she is, and she's not looking well. She looks like something is wrong. He says, I don't know if she was having some postpartum depression thing. I don't know, what's taking place with her state of mind. He said, but she's standing there buck naked holding our child, and then she starts to go up the stairs with our child in tow, as this all just was witnessed by myself and potentially their two young kids in their kitchen. He turns around, he leaves the kitchen, and he decides to follow her up the stairs because he's wondering to himself, well, what's going to happen with my young child? Why is she doing this? Why did she come downstairs buck naked? She's never done that before. This seems odd. As he's describing all of this, of course, I can't help but think to myself, listening to this, is she jabbed? Is this prion disease? Who's to know? I don't know their jab status, but this is part of what I'm thinking. Either way, I know postpartum depression is a real thing. I know that intrusive thoughts are a real thing. I know that all can exist, and chemical imbalances exist with women when they, after they've had a child. I'm well aware of this. With all of that said, he follows her up the stairs, and he goes to reach for the doorknob of their bedroom, which is now locked. He then again describes his thinking process, and he's trained in breaching doors, that there are ways that you can get through a door and into a door without knocking the door off the hinges. And he describes all of this, and he twists the knob, and he leans into the door and pops the door open. And he does it because his buck-naked wife is holding their infant child, and he doesn't know her frame of mind or what could happen, or, if something bad is happening right now that he is unaware of. Nothing really happens in that swath of time. She ends up getting dressed, and she ends up taking the child, and they end up, her and the child leave. And he says, I don't know where they're going, so he looks on his phone app where apparently they track each other's movements with their automobiles for security reasons, I guess. And he can see that she's on her way to the hospital because earlier she was complaining that her son and her are sick, physically sick, like mucus and the whole thing. So he can see that she's going to the hospital. So he starts apparently again on his way to the hospital, or he calls family members, they come and watch the kids, whatever else, and then he's on his way. And then he ends up hearing over the police scanner that they're looking for him for a domestic violence charge, and that he is trained in firearms and is ex-military and may be armed and dangerous. You can see how this immediately escalates in this particular story. And again, he's describing this. I'm trying to make a very long story short because it was over an hour and 40 some odd minutes him describing this, but he basically says that his wife lied about being injured, lied about having a broken wrist. X-rays were taken. He describes the verbiage in the X-ray technician's forms and language saying, well, it could be broken, quote unquote. But again, long story short, he was guilty before proven innocent. He spent 7 days in jail for something he didn't even do. Many police officers instantly had him as being guilty before any proof or any evidence had even reared its head. When he's in jail, he's describing some of the guards who were rather nice to him, and he's saying that some of them, again, were like, why are you even here, man? Like, we know who you are. What is this about? And he's looking at him, and he goes, I have no idea. I have absolutely no idea what's happening right now. And they even asked him at one point, and apparently it came down from the top, either the county prosecutor or state prosecutor or whatever it was, that they wanted him to go into solitary confinement. And as it turns out, they were mixing him up with another Mike Glover, who apparently had a massive criminal record, and of course wasn't him. So he and his friend are going back and forth in this conversation, and they're saying, how on earth could paperwork like that get messed up? Where you're getting me mixed up with a hardened criminal who just so happens to have the exact same name and middle initial. He says, don't you think that these people would look up your social security number and actually look up your real past history? And then they even went back and forth and they started saying that local police officers just don't like him because of his influence and they're jealous of him and they've always wanted to come after him and a number of other things. And all of this sort of just all came to a head with this particular incident that his wife fabricated in a fit of some kind of, I don't know, mental lapse or mental decline that she was having at the time or whatever it may be. They ask him if he wants to go into solitary confinement, and he looks at another one of the guards and goes, do I want to go into solitary confinement? And they went, no, you don't. Because there's no toilet, there's no sunlight, and you're basically pissing and shitting on yourself for day in and day out for the entire time. Ultimately, he was in there for 7 days, not in solitary confinement, but he was in a cell for 7 days. And then it ended up getting bailed out because they realized that, oh, wait, all these charges that we threw on him aren't really valid. And there's no proof to back any of this up, so we're just going to start dropping these charges and we'll let him and one of his friends bail him out. They were going to give him 30 years in prison. 30. Over 30. For multiple felonies. And he later describes that when he was talking on the phone from prison, he was asking one of the guards about a particular scenario regarding the entire situation or situations like it. And now that guard is being brought up on charges of tampering with evidence because that guard had a conversation with Mike Glover. Again, about this entire situation and whether or not they thought it was valid or not. I mean, it's beyond odd. And then again, if that all isn't bad enough in this scenario, he describes CPS, Child Protective Services, in Utah. And he openly describes that they are hands down the worst humans on the face of the planet. He breaks down their behavior, their threats, their vindictive approach, that they were basically saying, you're going to have to plea out on some misdemeanor charge of something if you ever want to see your kids again. I mean, it's one hell of a story, and it really is awful, but it shows in all of this the complete breakdown of what people perceive to be an actual justice system. Which isn't justice, of course, it's really a just us. It's a just them system. And they all work with one another against us, innocent people, in order to circle the wagons on their side because they, of course, are government and they never want to be wrong. I mean, that's the main lesson here, that if a female in a situation like that lies about something, everybody seems to just take it seriously and instantly believe it. And then they start throwing one charge after another, after another, after another on top of all of this. Now, I'm not saying it happens like that everywhere. And I'm not saying it just happens with females. There are men who fabricate stories of domestic violence among females all of the time in order to get back at them also for a particular thing, or again, someone's not of their normal frame of mind. And then something like this ends up popping off and it ends up just going downhill very, very quickly. That was certainly the case in this case. But consistently threatening him with not being able to see his kids if he doesn't plea out or plea down a particular charge, even though these charges were being thrown away, one after the other in very short order. He was quickly later on describing that it's been months since he's seen his wife and or young child, or that he only gets to see his infant child a certain number of hours every month. And same thing with his other children too. He also describes how they apparently attempted to come after his own mother, his elderly mother, who apparently drove from South Carolina out to Utah in order to, again, assist in a lot of this process regarding the children. So it's a long story. I'm going to leave it there, but I'm bringing it up because when you've heard me say on the show here that you'll consistently hear sheriffs say things like, "We are your last line of defense." In particular, when it comes to, again, federal action or quote unquote terrorist attacks or whatever phrase or whatever it is that they want people to believe. None of this is true. The fact is that we are our last line of defense and that we can't trust the judicial system to do anything correctly. Again, examine the last 4 years and what's happened with all of the mask wearing, the shot taking, the civil rights abuses, you name it. All of this is so exhausting because it hinges on one person saying something and then everybody blindly believing it by and large. Until a morally sound person comes around and reminds everybody that something is going on that isn't right, and that the way that people are behaving isn't right, and the way that groups of people are behaving is both not right and or immoral and illegal. And again, you've heard me bring up consistently the interagency civil wars that are taking place throughout society across the entire world. Is that these interagency civil wars are civil in the sense that people by and large aren't getting killed. They're having massive disagreements with one another, and that's happening because people are waking up at different paces than others. And unfortunately, as we know, there's a large percentage of individuals who are never going to wake up. They just won't. Christ himself could come back, drop out of the sky, remind everybody who he is, and people would think that it was a hologram. And people would think that it was some trick that was being played on their TV, when in fact, these are individuals who believe everything that's on their TV anyway. But if it counters their belief system, they just will rule in one way or another, or they'll rule in the opposite direction. That's why you haven't seen massive movement regarding the removal of these bioshots, for example, across the board from county to county. It's all tied up with corruption. It's all tied up with money. It's all tied up with grants and kickbacks that people took and 1,000 other things. That's why something as small as a fake domestic violence dispute, which wasn't domestic violence, listening to Mike Glover tell the story, which, by the way, his wife later recanted the entire story. Said that he didn't break her wrist, said that there was no way that he could have grabbed her. Even the lawyers on both sides said there's no way he could have grabbed you because you were holding onto your infant child. And you're claiming that the wrist that you were holding onto your infant child was broken, and yet your child never hit the ground and has no injuries of any kind. So, again, who's going to get charged here? Regarding, in his particular case, who's going to get charged with real crimes and fabricating such a story? And in the comments section, people were basically saying two things. They were saying anybody who criticized Mike Glover for being a proponent or being the victimizer in a domestic violence case should apologize to him. And then other people were saying, bro, you need to leave your wife right now and get away from that, because that's not right. And she's off her rocker, clearly, and something's going on. And if that's happened once, what's keeping that from happening ever again? So, again, we cannot put our trust in government at all for anything. We have to be self-reliant as much as humanly possible. And unfortunately, in these cases where something gets fabricated, and individuals don't do their due diligence, you could end up on the wrong end of that just us system, and you're screwed. Again, he was facing 30 years in jail, at least 5 felonies, for something he didn't even do. Now, if that's just one person, imagine how many innocent people are in jail right now as you're listening to that, who have been completely screwed by the system, everybody around them, and they've been set up and or framed or whatever, or just lied about. And now they're doing a hard time. These people are everywhere. Not just in our country, but everywhere. So, again, I'm going to link that in the description below if you want to hear the entire story. It really is beyond bizarre. And it certainly seems out of character for someone like him that he would actually do such a thing. But either way, again, the way that he lays out the entire story, you get a real glimpse into the unfair nature of everything that government has to offer and their agencies and their interagencies and how they all communicate and operate, but also, again, how there is a civil war consistently going on within every place of employment because you have the division of the awake and the asleep. And the fact that there are people who work within these agencies who know that everybody is not on the up and up, that a lot of these people are bad and evil and have evil ties and terrible motives and a number of other things. And that these people within these agencies, in particular if it's law enforcement, that they work with lawyers who are of equal mind. And they work with judges who are of equal mind. You know, again, I wrote about this in a Substack article a long time ago. I want to say it was the summer of 2021 in June about totalitarianism. And I said that's why this is the perfect crime. That's why the mask wearing shot taking is the perfect crime, because all you need is someone high up on the chain in the judicial system at the local level, not even the federal level, just the local level, to actually believe what is going on is real. And then they're going to operate as if everything that is happening is necessary and real because there's a real quote-unquote pandemic taking place. This is the divide in the world now. There are people who still think COVID exists, that there was a pandemic, that masks help, that the shots are helping people. This is a constant thing, which again pales in comparison to a spouse or a female or a male lying about a particular domestic violence incident, and then all hell breaks loose. But again, that should show people how small it can get and how corrupt it can get at a very small level. And then, of course, you take that into a hospital environment and everybody believes you. And then they've got cops looking for you. And then, again, so on and so on. Again, Mike Glover describes openly going into the police department to talk with these individuals. He wasn't turning himself in, so to speak, but he was on his way to the police department because he heard that they were looking for him. And he goes, "Why are they looking for me? What's happened? Is something wrong with my wife? Is something wrong with my kid?" He goes in with a friend of his and says, "Well, what do you all want? What the hell's happening?" And then, of course, having talked with the lawyer told him, when they start asking you specifics about the incident, tell them that you want to talk to a lawyer. And that's what happened. They started to ask him about specifics, and he says, "I think this is when I'm supposed to ask for a lawyer because I don't know what this is all about." And then they went, "So you want to talk to a lawyer?" And he goes, "Yeah." And they said, "Stand up." And he stood up, and they arrested him. They cuffed him, and they immediately took him to jail for 7 days. I mean, holy shit. That's messed up stuff. But that, again, that has to happen all of the time in our country on multiple different levels regarding multiple issues. So again, if you want to watch him describe all of this, it's interesting. It's certainly interesting. And again, I don't watch his channel. It was just something that popped up in my feed, and it was him talking about it. And I thought, I want to hear what he says about this, because I remember him being detained and arrested for alleged domestic violence. So let's hear it. And I heard it, and I thought, damn, what a hard lesson when it comes to learning for the first time that the justice system isn't all it's cracked up to be and isn't what you thought it would be. and learning that not every police officer is on the up and up. And he knows that there's bad cops out there, but at the exact same time, he got a crash course in it, and it turned his entire world upside down, and is still the case. I mean, he's now in legal battles against all of the people who wronged him in all of this. Some of which I think he's talking about, and some of which he can't. But it is incredible, absolutely incredible. So again, don't put your trust in government, and be careful who you associate with. And then, of course, don't make the same mistake twice. Choose your company very carefully. And again, I can't help but wonder, is she jabbed or not? It's possible, but who's to know? Because, again, a lot of these guys who claim to be vigilant, and a lot of these guys who, claim to not like government, a lot of them fell for the shots, and a lot of them don't know what's happening regarding the shots. So there's that too. Okay. Moving on here to education, I just have two things here that I want to read, both in the same vein though, and it has to do with replacement migration. This, of course, is a huge problem, continues to be a huge problem as we're being invaded. And as we all know, the school system can't manage these individuals because it's not designed to. Which is, of course, one of the things that's leading to its complete and utter collapse, which I'm fine with, but at the exact same time, the gullible individuals are trying to pick up Mercury with a fork here, and it's not working out well. But I want to show people and describe to people how insidious this is, and how the actual business of education itself is attempting to rewrite history and justify our invasion. You've heard me mention before in the past and read titles from this journal before regarding the American Educational Research Association. This is the largest education research association that exists in the world. I've presented at one of their conferences before. It was a complete and utter nightmare. And beyond research articles and journals that they have, they're actually a publisher of books as well. Now you can imagine the kinds of books that they publish. They all tend to be in the same vein. They all tend to be hard left-wing, very ideological, and based on race. And certainly with replacement migration being a UN scheme, and a documented UN scheme, which I'm going to read from that exact publication from the UN titled Replacement Migration. Here in just a minute, I want to run through a list of titles of books that AERA has published and are available for purchase. I, of course, don't recommend you waste $1 on any of these books because they're remarkably overpriced and absolutely terrible. Here's their most recent. Their most recent book that they've decided to publish is titled Inequality in Key Skills of City Youth, an International Comparison. Now, again, all about race, all about globalism, all about communism, and trying to get everybody on the same page. Here's the description of this book. It says, quote, "This groundbreaking research volume addresses the topic of educational inequality from a global perspective. It includes 16 chapters from an international group of scholars who examine how well city school systems from around the world are preparing young people, particularly poor and minority students, with the skills they will need for further study, work, and life overall. While skills in key domains, such as science, math, language, and civics, have been center stage in international comparisons, there has been growing recognition to the effects that education has on the development of border sets of capabilities, such as social and emotional skills, also known as non-cognitive, quote-unquote, or 21st century skills, unquote, that can affect the success of students in school and beyond. This volume aims to address the shortage of international data on the wide range of skills that students need to learn, enabling researchers to compare the types and causes of educational inequality in skills within and between cities, unquote. What a load of shit. I mean, what what a load of just absolute globalist jargon. You talk about the Jewish lobby doing everything that they can to make everything ubiquitous regarding, of course, communism, and then what we need to do to make sure that migrants and illegal aliens have what they need to grow and survive and be civic and learn and continue a life of study. These people couldn't be more dead asleep. And you can't make this up either. The very next title of the very next book, available in multiple formats, it says, is quite literally titled Volatility in State Spending for Higher Education. These people don't know why states aren't dishing out more money to schools. They have no idea. They can't figure it out. And if they ever arrive at the fact that more students are home learning on their own, away from the brick and mortar system, all they do is criticize those people. All they do is make fun of them. We understand that homeschooling is a thing and that people are continuing to do that, but that's remarkably detrimental to the brainwashing and the entire brick and mortar torture program that we have set up for them that is run by government mind control. So we need to do whatever we can to ostracize those people and try to fix what we need to fix and blah, blah, blah. And their solution is to fill their schools with illegal aliens, which of course is having a negative and detrimental impact on the number of teachers who want to actually work in those schools. Because even at the student teaching level, you have individuals walking into these schools as a student teacher, an undergraduate, walking in wanting to be, again, a school teacher, and then student teaching typically being the last thing that they need to do before getting certified and taking the test of certification. They're looking around, and it's not what it used to be. It's not the way that it was when they were a child. It's a whole lot darker, if you know what I'm saying. And it's a whole lot of non-English speaking individuals. And they don't have the skills. Which means you have to assume that there are endless people walking into student teaching and they're going, oh my God, I'm not going to student teach anymore. I'm just going to quit and I'll graduate without certification and I'll have a degree in education, but I'll just go do something else. I'll go sell cars for a living. And then they go and they do that. Because they're looking around and the landscape is not what it used to be. But it's these publishing companies and it's these educational globalist conglomerates that are doing whatever they can to justify why things are the way that they are. And now, all of their publications are all in the exact same vein. It all has to do with race, migration, globalism, and that we all need to do what the illegal aliens want us to do or what we think they want us to do. Ladies and gentlemen, the vast majority of illegal aliens don't want to attend American schools. They really just want to be here, break the law, suck our government for everything that they're worth and everything that they're willing to give them, and then, of course, take advantage of the people who live here legally and work hard. That's the plan. That's what they want. Here's the next publication. It's titled Handbook of Research on Teachers of Color and Indigenous Teachers. So there's a handbook of research on teachers of color and indigenous teachers, rather. So if you're white, you need to read this book so you understand what it's like to be a non-white school teacher or someone who's not white in the education profession. It's disgusting. The next one is titled Fairness in Educational and Psychological Testing, Examining Theoretical Research, Practice, and Policy Implications for the 2014 Standards. Fairness. And we know what that's based on. It's based on race. That things need to be fair, because if a dark-skinned person, heaven forbid, doesn't pass a test, It's because of the color of their skin. Now, as we know, that should be insulting to endless individuals regardless of their skin color. It should be insulting to everybody. But they'll justify it by saying, well, minorities, quote unquote, i.e., darker skinned individuals, don't do so well on certification exams or college entrance exams because, it's not catered to their skin color. Because they think that skin color thinks. It's amazing. The next one is titled Advancing Knowledge and Building Capacity for Early Childhood Research. Rather bland. Again, they're just trying to reinvent the wheel in some of these cases. Here's another one. Condition or Process, Researching Race in Education. And that was published in May of 2020. This keeps going back. The next one was titled Improving Research-Based Knowledge of College Promise Programs. That was published in 2020 also. Here's another one. Standards for Educational and Psychological Testing. Okay. Here's two more. The next one is titled Comparing Ethnographies, Local Studies of Education Across the Americas. You can venture to, and that was from 2017, you can venture to guess that one's probably filled with a whole lot of race stuff. The next one, and this is the coup de grace, ladies and gentlemen, also from 2017, titled, quote, Citizenship, Education, and Global Migration. Bingo. They're telling you what their scheme is. They're telling you what they have planned and what they're doing. And if you think that the education business is going to waver from what global government has in mind, I assure you they won't. Because they are one and the same. They're the same entity. They have the same plans. It's a branch on the same tree. They know exactly what they're doing, so they think, and they're carrying this out without a moment's thought. That's why, of course, getting back to the whole COVID stuff, that right there is, again, why they all fell for it. That's why every district fell for it. Hook, line, and sinker. Every policy, every program, everything. So if you don't think that there's global government, you've missed the boat on this. That ship has sailed. It's already out there. It's already proven. Case in point, the following document. This is a 117-page, I'm sorry, even worse than that, 177-page document. It's a PDF in multiple languages from the Population Division, Department of Economic and Social Affairs, United Nations Secretariat, titled Replacement Migration. The date of this is March 21st of 2000. Now, I'm going to scroll down to the part where it talks about the United States, but let me give you the table of contents. There's an introduction, the issues. There's a literature review. There's an approach of methodology and assumptions. And then there are country results. And a lot of their justification, as it turns out, regarding replacement migration, which we know means getting rid of white people. And then secondary, it means getting rid of the indigenous people of said country, regardless of skin color, and making everybody look the same as far as skin color is concerned. You're talking about, again, the eradication of races of people, including, I might add, all Americans, regardless of race. But they break down the following countries in this document. They break down France, and each one is about anywhere from 4 to 10 pages long, somewhere around there. France, Germany, Italy, Japan, the Republic of Korea, Russian Federation, United Kingdom of Great Britain and Northern Ireland, the United States of America, Europe. They just say Europe. They don't even bother mentioning the other countries in Europe outside of course, France, Germany, and Italy, implying that they have a very specific plan for all of them. Same thing, of course, with the United Kingdom and Northern Ireland. So they just say Europe. which is a 6-page long explanation, and then the European Union, which we know encompasses basically everybody else. So let me read the portion regarding the United States of America. Before I do, though, the other reason that they justify replacement migration as being necessary is they quite specifically and consistently talk about population decline. And they talk about birth decline. And that they say, well, we're looking as global government, globalists, Jewish lobby, Satanists. They're openly saying, because people are reproducing less, that we as global government have to take other people from other countries and continents and move them into these countries in order to alleviate the workforce because the people who live there aren't reproducing at the rate that they used to. Yes, there are many reasons why this is the case and blah, 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 economic reasons and so on and so on. They, of course, don't touch on, quote unquote, health care, as they would put it, which means, of course, the dissemination of biological weapons under the guise of a preventative medicine for the purposes of depopulation. They, of course, aren't going to say that, but that's the hidden scheme that is right out in front of everybody's faces. So here's what it says on page 105 regarding the United States of America. There are, 5 scenarios that they lay out. There are past trends that they introduce this with, and then a discussion at the end. This is only a page and a half, so give this a listen here. It says the following, quote, past trends. The total fertility rate in the United States dropped from 3.45 births per woman in 1950 through 1955 to 2.02 in 1970 through 1975. Except for a temporary period during the late 1970s and early 1980s when it hovered around 1.8, the total fertility rate has continued to be around 2 children per woman. Life expectancy at birth, meanwhile, has risen from 69 years of age in 1950 to 1955 to 75.7 years in 1990 to 1995. As a consequence of these changes, the proportion of the population aged 65 or older has risen from 8.3% in 1950 to 12.5% in 1995, and the potential support ratio declined from 7.8 to 1950 to 5.2 in 1995. As a point of comparison, the potential support ratio was 15 in 1900, when 4% of the population was aged 65 or older. Now it says Scenario 1. Quote, Scenario 1, the medium variant of the United Nations 1998 revision, assumes an annual net intake of 760,000 migrants per year between 1995 and 2050, for a total of 41,800,000 net migrants during the period. Accordingly, the total population of the United States is projected to increase continuously from 267 million in 1995 to 349 million in 2050. The results of the 1998 United Nations projections are shown in the annex tables. By 2050, out of the total population of 349 million, 59 million, or 16.8%, would be post-1995 immigrants or their descendants. The population aged 15 to 64 will increase slowly from 174 million in 1995 to 214 million in 2050, although not in a monotonic fashion. It says the population aged 65 or older will rapidly rise from 33 million in 1995 to nearly 76 million in 2050. As a result, the potential support ratio will decrease from 5.2 in 1995 to 2.8 in 2050. That was all scenario 1. Scenario 2 says, which is the medium, it says, quote, scenario 2, which is the medium variant with zero migration, uses the fertility and mortality assumptions of the medium variant of the 1998 revision, but without any migration to the United States after 1995. The results of this scenario are quite different from scenario 1. From those of scenario 1. It says the total population would increase to 290 million in 2050, which is 50 million less than in scenario 1. The population aged 15 to 64 would rise from 174 million in 1995 to 192 million in 2010 and 2015, and then decline, returning back to 174 million in 2050. The population aged 65 or older would double from 33 million in 1950 to 68 million in 2050. As a result, the potential support ratio would decline to 2.6 in 2050, which is slightly below the present in scenario 1. So I suppose we can figure out which scenario they're running right now. It doesn't seem to be scenario 2. It seems to be scenario 1. Here's scenario 3. Scenario 3 keeps the size of the United States population constant at its maximum of 298 million, and it would reach in 2030, assuming no in-migration after 1995. In order to keep the total population constant at that level, it would be necessary to have 6.4 million migrants between 2030 and 2050, which is an average of 319,000 migrants per year. By 2050, out of the total population of 298 million, 7.3 million or 2.5% would be post-1995 immigrants or their descendants. Yuck. Scenario 4. It says scenario 4 keeps the size of the population aged 15 to 64 constant at its maximum of 192.5 million, that it would reach in 2015, assuming no in-migration after 1995. In order to keep the working age population constant at that level, it would be necessary to have 18.0 million migrants between 2015 and 2050. Which is an average of 513,000 migrants per year. By 2050, out of the total population of 316 million, 25 million or 7.9% would be post-1995 immigrants or their descendants. Also not good. And then finally, scenario 5. It says scenario 5 keeps the potential support ratio at its 1995 value of 5.2 persons aged 15 through 64 for each person aged 65 or older. In order to keep the potential support ratio constant at that level, it would be necessary to have 593 million immigrants from 1995 to 2050. An average of 10 million per year. By 2050, it says, out of the United States total population of 1.1 billion, 775 million or 73% would be post-1995 immigrants or their descendants. That one is the worst scenario. Then it says discussion, and in conclusion, the official United States estimate of documented migrants into the United States from 1990 to 1996 is about 1.1 million per year. Thus, the past regular inflow into the United States is well above the number of migrants needed to prevent a decline in the total population or in the working age population. Also, under both scenarios 3 and 4, the percentage of post-1995 immigrants and their descendants, i.e. anchor babies, in the total population of 2050, 2.5% and 7.9% respectively, would be below the percentage of foreign-born that exists currently, 9.6%. It says figure 4.18 shows for scenarios 1, 2, 3, and 4 the population of the United States in 2050, indicating the share that post-1995 migrants and their descendants. It wraps up here and it says, in absence of migration, the figures show that it would be necessary to raise the upper limit of the working age to about 74 years in order to obtain in 2050 the same potential support ratio observed in 1995 in the United States, i.e., 5.2% of working age per each older person past working age, unquote. And then there are a series of charts, graphs, bar graphs, you name it. And then they do this again for the entire continent of Europe and numerous countries across the world. This is how they justify moving illegal aliens into a country. It's not for race elimination, as they would lead people to believe, although that's what it really is. And they're certainly not going to tell people it's because of cultural erasure. They're not going to do that either. They're not going to say that either. But that's what it really is. So their justification is it's because of a lower birth rate and a lower working force, i.e. slavery. So we need to have people available in these countries to produce particular things. Again, you've heard me say this before. This is the thing I don't like about Donald Trump. He consistently brings up that the most injured and the most downtrodden and the most taken advantage of and abused as a result of illegal immigrants and illegal aliens working their way into our country is having a negative impact on blacks, Hispanics, and Asians in America. Well, as it turns out, it's white people. In fact, as it turns out, it's all legal Americans, regardless of age. He's not saying that this is detrimental to every legal American. And he needs to say that. Because again, this is a scheme. This is a plan. This has been a plan for a very, very long time. It dates back even before the protocols of the Elders of Zion, where it clearly says in that text that we will replace and remove individuals who are native born to that country with foreign individuals, and this is one of the ways that we eliminate people. Again, if you want to read that document in its entirety, it's on my website at the bottom of the list or toward the bottom of the list of the Government Documents tab. It's in the 30s there. It's 33, 34, 35, somewhere in there. Again, free PDF. You can take a look at it. You can download it. You can peruse it. It's alarming. But they're, again, openly scheming and writing down what they have planned and what they're doing here. And they've been doing it for a very long time. And as we know, sliding into jab-related things now, they have a jab-related plan and a medical-related plan to eliminate people too. Again, this is hard for people to swallow even today. It's difficult for people to understand that there is a depopulation agenda that is consistently occurring. Even Reese Report recently, and I put it at the tail end of the last war video, put out, of course, the entire report and did a report on the report of the Daigle Report, which, of course, tracks and predicts depopulation and the numbers of individuals that are passing away in every country around the world. And again, what's one of the major reasons why? Well, it's weaponization. It's weapons being used against us in one form or another, and right now, the weapon that is being used against people the most is the biological weapon masquerading as a preventative medicine. Let me read you this very quickly. This was apparently a memo that was put out by Javier Becerra, Secretary of the Department of Health and Human Services. And it says the following here. It says, this opened the door at the very top. was someone else's explanation, and they broke down a couple of quotes here, but it says this opened the door on 7/24/24 of this year, 4 or 5 days ago, for the FDA commissioner to declare emergency use authorizations for bird flu viruses of any kind. It says the following here. Federal Register Volume 89, number 142, Wednesday, July 24th, 2024. Pages, 59,919 through 59,921. It says from the Federal Register online via the government publishing office of www.gpo.gov. It says FR Doc number 2024-16247, Department of Health and Human Services, Office of the Secretary, Declaration of Emergency pursuant to the Federal Food, Drug, and Cosmetic Act. Agency is Office of the Secretary, Department of Health and Human Services, Action, Notice of Amendment. It says, quote, I have now amended the April 19th, 2013 determination to recognize that there is a significant potential for a public health emergency that has a significant potential to affect national security or the health and security of United States citizens living abroad, and that involves biological agents, namely pandemic influenza A viruses and influenza A viruses with pandemic potential, unquote. That, of course, is signed by Javier Becerra. So what they're pointing to is they're saying it was this far back that they were scheming in 2013, making amendments back then to naming a pandemic as long as they say so, and getting people to follow along with it because we're government and we know what's best. They've got to pull something like this again in the future. Again, if they do it, this year, or they do it next, or they do it whenever they do it. This is the civil war that's consistently taking place here. It's within these agencies because you have people in these agencies who believe this. And then you have people in the agencies who don't. And then you have people outside of the agencies looking in, like us, and we know it's fake, and we know it's manufactured, but then there are people who have no idea that it's manufactured, and they're out here with us too. So you're talking about a multi-dimensional civil war that's taking place on a wavelength of thought that is all over the board. So again, if they fire these individuals, if Donald Trump again legally takes over, of course, if the entire thing isn't stolen to begin with, and I put a Fox News video in the Last War video also and on my Gab page where Brett Baer is openly stating that they're in a dead heat, if that's to even be believed, which clearly it isn't. It's a Fox News poll where Kamala Harris and Donald Trump are tied in Wisconsin and tied in Minnesota, or Kamala Harris has a lead in Minnesota, but they're tied other places. It's completely absurd. There's nothing keeping them from just taking the election again if they want to. Unless, of course, the good guys behind the scenes are again monitoring all of this for a sting operation to round up even more people. I certainly hope that's the case, because if something like this, another fake pandemic, is down the road again, I'm telling you what, I think less people will believe it, but that isn't going to stop the people who run organizations, companies, etc., into still enforcing all of this, because if government tells them to do it, damn it, ladies and gentlemen, they're going to do it. They really will. And in conclusion, that leads me to this. This was sent to me by our Virginia educator, who again will hopefully be on the show sometime toward the middle or end of August. And they have much to say and much to share, having left the business now, but they emailed me this. This was a particular announcement that went out regarding a university in the general area in Virginia. And this has to do with Longwood University, which I've mentioned on the show before. And it was titled Sad News. It says, quote, "Good morning. I write with sad news that two former Longwood faculty members who were well known in the Farmville community passed away this week. Dr. Stephen Keith, who taught in the Department of Education from 1992 to 2018, died suddenly. They even say it. They say died suddenly. Because somebody told them that this is part of general vernacular now. They don't even know that there's a documentary titled Died Suddenly about why they're dying suddenly. But they'll just say died suddenly. When in the past, before 2020, no one ever used that terminology. They would just say they passed away unexpectedly or they have passed away. They wouldn't say died suddenly. It says his obituary is available here. A celebration of life will be held on Sunday, July 28th of 2024 from 2 p.m. to 4 p.m. at the Three Roads Brewery in Farmville. And then it says, quote, Dr. Susan Booker, who taught in the Department of English from 2003 to 2008, died on Tuesday after a heroic struggle with a long illness. The obituary is forthcoming. We will always remember their contributions as faculty colleagues and teachers. Best wishes, whomever, their president or what have you. Ladies and gentlemen, I assume it's shot related. We can make that assumption. I'm sure they weren't spring chickens. I mean, one of them, no offense, was 76 years old, or 74 years old, rather. And the other was probably not very young either. However, we can assume it was shot related. The male who passed away was wearing a bow tie, after all. I've seen a picture of the man. He's wearing a bow tie. Bow ties are indicative, as I've brought up on the show, both half serious and half, comically, but mostly serious. Bow ties are indicative of individuals who are pseudo-intellectuals and people who think that they've got it figured out, and if they wear a bow tie, then people will take them more seriously, when in fact, for those of us who know what the bow tie represents, in particular if you wear one without a tuxedo, it's indicative of a do-gooder and an order follower, and somebody who wants to make it look like they stand alone intellectually, when in fact they don't. They just do what they're told. And they just fall for the latest thing, which is unfortunate. They're trying to pass one over on people. This is why I've never trusted people who wear bow ties. You stay away from them. I mean, again, I'm saying that half-heartedly, but it's true. I used to work with an administrator at the high school where I previously worked and left for all the reasons I've mentioned. He never wore a bow tie, not ever, until it was graduation night. And then on graduation night for these students, which was the only graduation I ever attended and the last one I've ever attended because it was a nightmare. I've told that story on the show before. But he wore a bow tie, and I thought to myself, what a poser. Wearing a bow tie for the first time in front of the largest group of people he's ever going to be in front of, and he thinks that somehow if he gives a presentation on stage, not wearing a coat, but wearing a dress shirt, slacks, and a bow tie, that all of a sudden we're going to think that he's, I don't know, the cat's pajamas. And then, of course, he had black-rimmed glasses on, which he also never wore. I mean, I thought to myself, nerd alert, what are you trying to do? Why are you trying to pass one over on people? It was ridiculous. And, of course, he was completely retarded, and I knew that, and lots of other people did too. But either way, so yeah, bow ties. Watch out, people. They tend to not make good decisions, and they tend to be posers, as I stated earlier. But again, rest in peace to those individuals. But were you jabbed? And that's like I mentioned just a moment ago. That's one university, one small university in one state in 1 week with two former employees. I wonder what's happening across the entire nation. I think we have a pretty good idea. There had better be justice for this. There had better be. It had better happen sometime. That's all I'm saying. With that said, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for listening as always, and I'll catch you on Wednesday. Peace. Thank you for listening to American Education FM. Make sure and check out AmericanEducationFM.com for more information. Take care and God bless.